And this is where having a food scale is going to be really, really important because it allows you to be consistent. Oftentimes when I bring up tracking food or weighing food out, people are really scared by this idea.
They go a little cross-eyed.
Right. They go a little cross-eyed and they're really scared by the idea of having to track their food, or I don't have time to do this. But I promise when we break this down, it's a very, very simple process. There was a study that was recently published where they took people and they put them on a calorie restrictive diet, right? You know, your Jenny Craig's, your Weight Watchers, all these popular things, right? And they put the second group on a protein prioritization, right? Where they just prioritized protein and that was it. And that group lost a significant more amount of weight than those that were restricted on calories. And a good rule of thumb right off the bat, when in doubt, if it has a long ingredient list, we want to stay away from it.
Or if you can't pronounce half the stuff that's in there, you should probably stay away from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so the length of it really, really does matter.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Health Accelerator Challenges. This is your host today, Cade Archibald, and I am excited to be here. We got a really, really fun, interactive show for you guys today. So hopefully you brought some notepads. If you're listening to this, take some notes. We're going to be diving into some really cool stuff and with a special guest. So before we dive into that, just want to follow up with last week's Health Accelerator Challenge. I went through kind of my story and how I was able to implement the 6 essentials. So if you think about the 6 essentials, that's your that's getting the right sleep. So getting 8 hours of good sleep, doing mindset morning. No more than 1 gram of sugar, get some hot, cold exposure, 30-30 exercise. And I'm missing one. Let's see. Heat, cold, sleep. We got, what am I missing? Mindset morning. And anyway, so type into the chat box how your experience was. Were you able to add in one of those essentials to your daily activity? Let me know how that went. And then today, we're going to be diving in. We got a special guest. Hopefully, a lot of you guys know him. Some of you that are, hydration. Thank you, Anna. Yeah, that's like that's the most important. You got to get your hydration in for the day. So getting your electrolytes and your water intake, half your body weight in ounces. So let me know how that went for you. Report back, type it into the chat box. And then today I want to, if you guys have some really good questions, we're going to be covering how to structure your meals and really how to make sure you get enough protein and nutrients into your diet so that you can be a lean, mean fighting machine like our guest today, which is Trysten Slagowski.
Hey, guys.
Yeah, so we got Trysten here. He's our fitness advisor at East West Health, also a program advisor, just a super dynamic guy. Also, a fun fact about Trysten, if you didn't know, he was a college quarterback, and he's a pretty fun, cool guy. For some of the clients out there, maybe you've worked with Trysten on workout regimens, fine tuning some of your exercises, or maybe he's your program advisor. Mm-hmm. But today, he's going to be talking to us a little bit about food. So. Yeah, what do we got here today?
Yeah, so I want to start with protein. So we all, you've probably heard me talk about it. We preach about it in everything that we do here at East West is the importance of protein. And in my opinion, it's the most important macronutrient out of all three. So we know that macronutrients is protein, carbs, and fats. And so protein, Kate, can you tell me, what to you is the main function of protein in the body?
It's a building block.
Building block. Right. So we know that we can't build muscle without the presence of protein. But one of its other main functions is satiety or keeping you full for longer, right? So the more protein we consume, the fuller we tend to be for a longer period of time. And then therefore we're able to eat less and consume less. And then stacked with certain peptides, our weight loss just kind of, takes off. Right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start with protein and the importance of it. But then I also wanted to cover how to read a food label, how to understand a food label, because sometimes it can be a little bit daunting and confusing. And so I want to start with, we understand the importance of protein. Now, how do I incorporate that into what I'm doing here, East West, and into my diet overall? So we look right up here. You can see right up here always starts at the top. You just start at the top and read down. That's the simplest way you can understand any food label. And you want to start with the serving size right through here.
Nice. So, and for those of you just listening in, we have the food label with the nutrition facts. So start at the serving size or something.
Yep, always start at the serving size. And what's tricky here is that the United States, for some reason, have decided that we're going to use a different unit of measurement than the rest of the world, right? So
we're Americans.
We're Americans, right? So but they also provide parentheses right here, grams. And so one thing, a rule of thumb, is that you always want to go by weight, not volume. So a great example of this is found in peanut butter. We all love peanut butter. It's my favorite food in the entire world, right? A serving size in the United States is 2 tablespoons. It's a unit of volume, not weight, right? And so, your grandma does it. We take a scoop of sugar or peanut butter, and it's never level. It's always, inconsistent. So we're always going by weight, not volume, which is this parenthesis right here. So you'll see, for example, chicken on any package, there will be a serving size, and in parentheses, there will be grams. And this is where having a food scale is going to be really, really important, because it allows you to be consistent. Oftentimes when I bring up tracking food or weighing food out, people are really scared by this idea.
They go a little cross-eyed.
Right. They go a little cross-eyed, and they're really scared by the idea of having to track their food, or I don't have time to do this. But I promise when we break this down, it's a very, very simple process. And so
one thing, and maybe you're with me, I know you're a lot more exact, but once I started weighing things, I felt like I got a better vibe or a better understanding of, okay, this is about that much.
Yeah.
And then I felt like I could just roll with it.
Oh yeah, 100%.
It's a nice practice to just like weigh stuff out. So then you actually know how much is that big heaping scoop of peanut butter or whatever.
Absolutely. You get really, really good at determining exactly, what a serving size looks like. All right. And so another really key and component of all of this is that all of these numbers, right? And we'll cover what each one means and exactly what they mean here. But all of these numbers are contingent upon the serving size. We go beyond that, then all of these numbers then change, right? And so it's really important to, especially when we're tracking, to understand how to adjust if our serving size increases. So we're going to use an example here. 4 ounces and or 112 grams. Everything on this food label is indicative of that amount. So we're going to put the chicken down. And now I should stop here for a second and always say that when we're dealing with protein or meat specifically, I always get this question: do I measure my meat raw or cooked? Well, you're not going to eat it raw, so always measure it cooked. So in a lot of people, I see them all the time, they'll put raw chicken in a bowl, they'll measure it, but when we cook it, it tends to shrink in size. It loses moisture, right? So it's going to lose weight. So always weigh the meat when it's cooked and go off of that number, not necessarily the raw component there. So we're going to cook, our chicken, and then on our food scale, we set our bowl or our plate or whatever it is, and we click 0. They all have, tear 0. This is a button that every single scale has. Once it's 0, everything from that point will be measured.
Took me a while to figure out what tear meant.
Yeah, tear just means 0, right? Right. And so, we're going to have a 0 button or a tear button. We'll put the chicken in there, and as soon as we hit 112 grams and or 4 ounces, that is 1 serving size. And so everything on this label is going to be reflecting that. So our calories in that 4 ounces or that 112 grams, we have 130 calories. This is pretty standard across most meats, chicken especially, right? And then the other thing is the protein content. So in that 4 ounces, which is cooked on your bowl in your scale, we have 25 grams of protein. Now, typically, I'll go beyond that when I'm preparing because I want as much protein as I can get in every single meal, right? So I'll typically do between 6 and 8 ounces of protein or chicken when it's cooked. So going beyond that, I'm going to have to make those calculations. If I go to 8 ounces or, doubling 112 grams being 224 grams, I'm going to have to, I now have 50 grams of protein and 260 calories.
All right. Interesting. And so this is on chicken. So what was the conversion again?
So 4 ounces, it's 112 grams typically. You'll always have that conversion done for you. So we use ounces and pounds and things like that
So
in America.
It's right here, right on the label.
Every label, you'll always have a parentheses. And again, the great example being peanut butter. You have tablespoons or you have cups or whatever it might be. You'll see that oftentimes on rice, for example. You'll see half a cup and things like that. In parentheses will always be the weight component or the conversion component that everyone should really stick to for consistency.
Awesome. So 4 ounces of chicken, about 25 grams of protein. So you could have 8 ounces, you're going to get 50.
Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that, like I said, protein, one of its main roles is, you're right, building blocks, building muscle. We can't build muscle without the presence of protein. But that second one, satiety, right? Keeping you full for longer. So if we have someone that comes into the program, right, and we ask them, okay, we want, 200 grams of protein, right? That's a great goal for them to have, but that's realistically, we're not going to get them there right away, because if we shove 200 grams of protein into a body that has never consumed 200 grams of protein before, you're full longer. Typically, you're bloated. You just feel like you're force feeding at that point, right? Yeah. And so just like with exercise and how I work with a lot of you guys, incrementally increasing your protein content is very, very important. So starting 1 week, we hit 70 grams for a 2-week period. We've adjusted. We bumped to 100. We bumped to 125. We incrementally increase. Your body's able to get used to this new level of protein. 200 is a great goal. That's going to help you stay, for longevity purposes, but maybe it's not the immediate goal.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially if you're like longevity wise, you got to have muscle, right? And so you're not getting your protein, you're not building muscle. So what's a good rule of thumb? So you mentioned 200 grams.
Yeah.
But let's say my goal body weight's 180 pounds. What would be the ideal?
Yeah. So the typical recommendation would be either between 0.8 and 1.0 grams per pound of your ideal body weight, right? And so for a weight loss perspective, typically I'll start people at 0.8 grams, just from a calorie perspective, and start them there. And that's the goal. But again, I'm going to work up to that, because that ends up being, between 150 to 200 grams, depending on their weight loss goals, right? Yeah. And that's still a lot of protein when you break things down.
Yeah. So if I'm trying to get like my goal weight, or now I'm actually there, but previously I was, at one point in my life I was like 235, 240. Right. And so getting down to 180, it would just be focusing on that kind of 180 grams of protein.
Yeah, focusing on that 180 grams of protein. And when you break it down, like, I always tell people that when we start this, they're like, wow, that's a lot of food, right? I have to eat a lot of food, right?
It's a little intimidating.
Yeah, it can be intimidating, but in reality, it's really not that much food, especially when we purely focus on protein, right? And so, for example, I like to point this out right through here. 1 gram of protein contains 4 calories, okay? And so if you break things down, let's say I wanted 200 grams of protein, right? Or 100 grams of protein, right? If I consumed just 100 grams of protein, which seems like a lot, all I've consumed is 400 calories, right? And that's just protein.
Yeah, that's pretty low calorie intake.
Right. And so if we're avoiding a lot of the rices and the filler foods, the carbohydrates, the pastas, things like that, and we're just building our meal around protein and focusing on protein, we do not add very much as from a calorie perspective at all. In fact, there was a study that was recently published where they took people and they put them on a calorie restrictive diet, right? Your Jenny Craig's, your Weight Watchers, all these popular things, right? And they put the second group on a protein prioritization, right? Where they just prioritized protein and that was it. And that group lost a significant more amount of weight than those that were restricted on calories. They didn't track that group's calories. They simply had them prioritize protein with every meal, and they lost, I believe, on average, 10 pounds more than the group that was on calorie restricted.
Yeah, that's pretty intriguing. Just focusing on protein, because you're going to be fueling your body. You're going to build muscle. You're going to build muscle easier when you're focusing on protein, and then you don't crave all the other garbage that comes along with
absolutely
lack of protein or a heavy appetite.
Yeah, and absolutely. And we also know, and Reagan talks about this all the time, it's a compounding domino type effect is what I like to refer to it as. So we consume more protein and we combine that with the peptides that we do and also working out and getting our workouts, dialed in. We then build more muscle, which then increases our rate of metabolic activity, right? So the more muscle we have in our body, the more calories we therefore need to maintain that new level of muscle mass, right? Which means our metabolic rate has increased. And therefore, we're able to have, a snack or a cookie or a piece of cake and not gain the weight as a,
you guys.
Yeah, not you guys. But theoretically, have, those snacks and not gain the weight to the same degree that we may have when we were, more so fat than we would.
Yeah. No, I think that's That's awesome how it works. And so let's talk about tools real quick, and then I know we got a couple other labels we can go through. So what would be some good tools? So we got some like tracking stuff, but I think the scale, like you can pick those up on
Amazon. Yeah, super, super cheap. They all essentially do the same thing. They're just little food scales.
If you're a client of ours, like, and you want one,
reach out to me. I'm happy to
send us a message. We'll grab one.
Yeah. I'll make sure you get one. They're very, very easy to use, and they contain all the units of measurement, both in the customary and the metric system, which we use primarily customary here in the United States. And so, but again, we're just going to make it even, I should write a letter to Congress and just say, hey, we're going measure. but yeah, the food scale, and then also having a food or a tracking app is super important. You can go old school and you can do pen and paper and write everything down. That gets a little meticulous in my eyes.
Yeah.
So having the app, and a lot of these apps even have a bar scan feature where you can just scan the barcode of the food. It pulls up. It has a huge database. MyFitnessPal, being this blue one right here, is my favorite. I use this all through college. There is a subscription window where that wasn't the case when I was in college, but of course there is now. But it's very, very small, and it's worth the investment because it has the biggest, most comprehensive database in that specific app, and it pulls up everything you need to know, and you can adjust your serving sizes and everything.
Yeah. I think that's like, especially someone that's just starting off and really wants to dial in. You're working on losing weight. I think, using things like that. So as you use those tools, as you start weighing your food, you learn a lot about food in general. You can portion it out, because now it's like, oh, that's about this many grams of protein. I'm a little less specific than you are. I know.
Yeah, I'm pretty dialed in. Yeah,
Trysten's dialed in. I'm more of a generalist. I need about this many, but I love that. Well, let's dive into. You want to cover some carbs?
Carbohydrates, yeah. So carbohydrates are demonized oftentimes in a lot of diet cultures and things like that. I don't even like the word diet because it implies you're restricting or taking away something, right? So I'm a big believer of yes, we want to reduce sugar. We want these blood labs to improve. And so we put these individuals, our clients, on a specific pathway. But we want it to be something that's able to be replicated, right? And so diet to me refers to how you bring food into the body, how it impacts your food, or how it impacts your body, and how you can consistently maintain it, right? Because it makes little to no sense to, cut everything out, because eventually all of us will fall off the wagon, right? And so carbs are one of these things where you'll see no carbs, no carbs, no carbs. Well, here at East West, we encourage carbohydrates. It's the timing of the carbs, right? And so carbs, again, are our body's main source of energy. It's how we typically, I'll do carbohydrates before a workout or something like that, or I'll do it, you'll see it right here, before bed, right? And we know this because when we
maybe not right before bed, but a couple hours.
Yeah, a couple hours before bed.
That's the prime time.
Yeah, right. We get the spike in insulin, which is in response to the carbohydrate intake, and then we get that bit of a drop, which usually results in drowsiness. So we want to time that right, and I do that all the time. It works really, really well for me. But carbohydrates are really important for the energy in the body, right? They're not something to be over-consumed, right? It's when in America, it's kind of backwards. I use Olive Garden as a great example, right? You go to Olive Garden, you order fettuccine Alfredo. You get about this much pasta and you get about this much chicken, right? Yeah. And it's right. And so it needs to be reversed. You need about this much chicken and this much pasta, right? And if that were set up that way, we would prioritize protein in every single meal, because carbohydrates are never going to be an actual good source of protein for you. But the concept remains the same across the board here on the food label. It all starts at the top. We have our parentheses here. Always look for the parentheses for our weight. We have obviously our calories, which is how many calories we're consuming in that amount of whatever we're eating. And then you have down here the total amount of carbohydrates in there. And oftentimes that's where they include the total sugars and the added sugars. And I think it's really important to know the difference between the two. Fruit has sugar in it, right? And berries, being our best friend, are lower on that glycemic index because they contain a lower amount of naturally occurring sugar, where the more tropical fruits like pineapples, mangoes, bananas contain more of those naturally occurring sugars, right? And so we don't want any of the added sugars. And so I think that's, we hit on this all the time, the honeys and the fruit that has sugar, that's okay. That's that naturally occurring sugar. We're wanting to avoid that added sugar.
For sure. Yeah, and that's what the 6 essentials is all about. So yeah, if you're having some berries, some fruit, not going to be the end of the world. All right, well, let's you want to cover?
This one's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this.
Yeah. So this has probably been hit on a few times here at East West, is the importance of what, the quality of the food, not just the quantity and consuming certain amounts of certain things, right? It's all great to have a protein, goal, and I'm trying to hit this protein goal, but the quality of that protein or the quality of the food to hit that goal is just as important as that goal itself. And so a great way is learning how to understand the ingredients list, right? And so you'll see here two familiar things. We have a nutrition label here and here. It's read, essentially the same way. This is just set up a little bit different. The ones were top to bottom, but the rules remain the same. You can read left to right here. But I'm more interested in the ingredients list. And a good rule of thumb right off the bat, when in doubt, if it has a long ingredient list, we want to stay away from it.
Or if you can't pronounce half the stuff that's in there, you should probably stay away from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so the length of it really, really does matter. And so I used the Kind bar here, and this is all the work of Nikki. She works with me. She's fantastic. She's a wizard when it comes to whatever software it is that puts these together. So we have to give her a shout out because this is all her.
Yes, thank you, Nikki.
So the ingredient list right here, we use a Kind bar. So Kind bar is marketed as something that is healthy. Right? You see it all the time, all of the stores. It's in the granola aisle section. It is a healthy food. It's a healthy granola bar, right? We turn it around, we take a look at the back, and first of all, we see it has added sugar, and then we see it has a bunch of ingredients here that probably shouldn't be there or not considered healthy, right? And within that, and this has been talked about, I believe, with Anne for a few of you, is the hidden versions of sugar, right? So the glucose syrup, right? That's just a hidden name for sugar, right? Yeah. They may not have to list it specifically, but it's a hidden name for sugar. And so we have a length there. And another thing to keep in mind is that these are listed in the quantity that they appear in the food, right? So the ones there's more of it up front, they'll be at the top. The one, there's smaller amounts, the trace amounts will be towards the bottom. It's going to be unhealthy regardless, but you'll start to see things like sucralose and things like that at the top in large quantities in these particularly sweet foods or even quote unquote healthy foods, right? And then over here, we compare something that I consider to be a better alternative, right? I mean, when anything in a package, we're never going to find anything perfect, right? Unfortunately, we haven't found that yet.
Yeah, I think that's really key is if you're, really looking at the proteins and the carbs, let's focus on getting those sources from non-packaged, really, real foods as opposed to a package. But I also think it's important, sometimes.
Yeah, when in doubt, right? Or when in a pinch.
You gotta get some fuel.
Right. I mean, a great example, Reagan and I got on a flight from Houston and I lived off of Kind bars for 3 hours, or of RX bars for 3 hours because we had no options, right? So this is the lesser of two evils. And you'll see why is we have a very small, comprehensive list of ingredients, all of which you probably know what they are, right? And that's another good rule of thumb is that if you have no idea what it is, you probably shouldn't be putting it in your body. Whereas the RX bar, it's very transparent with what it is. And everyone has different preferences. I think these are really good. They taste really good. I eat them all the time, but we have, 3 eggs, 6 almonds, 4 cashews, 2 dates, and that's it, right? That's how they make the bar. And so again, there's no such thing as the perfect packaged food. We want to focus on whole foods, but when in doubt, there are better alternatives, and learning how to read and recognize these food labels and the ingredient list is really important.
Awesome. All right. Last but not least, let's talk a little on fats.
So fats are important. And again, much like with carbohydrates, there's some negative connotation associated with fat, right?
Yeah.
So I get this all the time. And this is something that was
or there's a lot of positive connotations with keto.
With keto. Just eat fat all the time, right? So I think there's benefits that, on both sides. But the main thing that I like to debunk right off the bat is that I hear all the time, and this was really common in diet culture a long time ago, fat makes you fat, right?
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily true. And if we break this down, I can see where they're coming from. So in carbohydrates and protein, each one of them, 1 gram was 4 calories, right? With fat, 1 gram contains 9 calories. So it's a more calorically dense food. It's not necessarily making you fat, but I can understand why they developed that idea because you can eat a smaller amount of it and gain more calories and therefore exceed your caloric intake. And then that's how we put on weight, the thermodynamic component of gaining weight. And so that's where that idea comes from is fat doesn't make you fat. It's just more calorically dense, meaning there's going to be more calories within that small amount, right? So peanut butter is a great example. I'll use peanut butter all day long. Peanut butter is a high-fat food derived from peanuts. You can consume 32 grams, which is equivalent to 2 tablespoons, and I have that memorized because I eat it every single day. It is 190 calories roughly. And I think this is actually a peanut butter label here, maybe not with it being there, and consume a smaller amount of that for that amount of calories. And so fat is not evil per se. Let's see, do we have a question?
No, it's just,
okay.
It's like some.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, just a summary.
Yeah.
But it's also really important, and Reagan talks about this all the time, in hormone regulation and keeping, our hormones healthy in our body. Cholesterol, is also a super important part in that, the hormone regulation.
Yeah. Fats are really important. They can also help with satiety as well.
Yeah.
Proteins and fats, and I think that's where some of that keto is actually it's got a lot there, because if you're just eating like meats and some fats, you're not going to eat as much.
Yeah, and that's
really where the carbs kill you, is if you're not solving like that craving, that little gremlin that's on your shoulder saying, "Hey, go grab that bag of chips," or go eat that bag. If you're not satisfying that guy before he pops up, then we go to the munchies and the carbs. Whereas if you're really smart with getting good sources of protein, good, healthy, clean fats, not necessarily trans fats, but some of these natural occurring, lots of omegas, avocados. That's probably one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I'm more of an avocado guy rather than a peanut butter guy.
I'll do both. But you're
not as much protein there.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But no, and I think this is a super helpful conversation, and hopefully this was helpful for you guys, listeners out there. Awesome. Anything else to add before we wrap up?
No, I think that's it. I think one thing I like to always point out, especially on the fat thing, just before we go, is that you'll see a lot of this in your quote unquote plant-based protein, right? Your nuts and your things like that. Plant-based protein, it's highly processed in my opinion, but nuts specifically, right? They're always referred to as a great source of plant-based protein. It's a huge marketing component for them.
Yeah.
It is not, right? I mean, you look at a handful of almonds, which again is about 28 to 32 grams. You're going to need about 7 to 8 grams of protein for almost 200 calories. So that ratio isn't there. It's a great source of fat. These nuts are, right? It's not a great source of protein. So be on the lookout for that if you're kind of relying more so on the nuts and the fat sources, the plant-based proteins.
Yep. Yeah, nuts can be inflammatory depending on what's going on with internal things. So yeah, be smart with those. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trysten. All right, so your challenge this week. Let's get your adequate amount of protein in. So let's see if everyone can get their ideal body weight in grams of protein. Let's see you do it. So that's the goal. Score yourself if you can. You get a point a day for that, and let's see who can get 7 points by next week. And we will see you all next time. Thanks for joining us.